Take a quick look at if and else. And we're going to go over it relatively quickly because it's pretty intuitive. As you can see, an if statement starts with an if, it then contains a test, and then a colon. Now we're going to get into what the block is about and the syntax that's used to define a block, which as you can see is a colon followed by an indent. But first let's just look at an overview. If the test is true, then we're going to execute this line. So if the test on line 4 is true, which is basically comparing an integer to 100 and seeing if it's less than or equal to 100. If that's true, then exit the program. Otherwise, go ahead and print these two print statements. Now the idea between if and else is that only one of the two blocks can get executed. Either the exit is going to occur or the two print statements will occur. There's no situation where they could both occur and or be executed. And in fact, there's no situation where neither of them, one of them has to be executed because it's an if-else statement. Now we could change it, of course, but we'll go into that in a moment. Here's another example. We're taking input from the user, converting it to an int, and then checking to see if it's even. See, this is if the number is even. This is what this statement means. If 2 divides evenly into the number, then it must be even. And we're printing your number is even and 2 divides evenly into it. Otherwise, we're printing the number is odd and you're pretty odd too. And then we're printing done. What we want to begin to do first is be able to evaluate the test. In this case, you can see we're saying if this modulus expression results in a 0, if it's equal to, the double equals is something we'll come back to in a minute. If it's equal to 0, then execute these two lines. Again, this is exclusive. If this was true and we did execute these two lines, then we certainly would not be executing these lines. They're exclusive. When we're done, we're printing the word done because I want to show that there's a statement that will execute once we're done with the if-else. As you can see, the print statement and also the first two lines, lines 1 and 2, are not in any block. The only conditional statements and the only conditional lines that may or may not execute are on lines 5 and 6 and 9 and 10. Here's another example, and this one is making use of something called Elif. Elif is sort of like saying else if. So if you look at a broad view of this, we're saying if the test on line 4 is true, then go to line 5. Otherwise, if the test on line 7 is true, go to line 8. Otherwise, go to line 11 and 12. Again, we can think of these statements as exclusive. That means only one of the blocks, 5, 8, and 11 and 12, are going to get executed. Only one, and we also know because of the exclusivity here and the fact that there's an else at the end, we know that one of them will get executed for sure, either 5 or 8 or 11, 12. And that's because of the way it's written. If this is true, do this. Otherwise, if this is true, do this. Otherwise, and remember, consider that implicit in this else is basically if the true above were not true. If the if were not true and the elif are not true, then go ahead and execute 11 and 12. So that's the concept between if, elif, and else. Now, you can have these in any combination as long as it makes sense. We could have an if by itself. If I print done here, if the test is true, then we're going to exit, and then we're going to print done. In fact, we might just do this. Consider the program flow here, and I'll be asking you to consider which lines are going to get executed. If the test is true, then execute line 5. And what happens after that? We just have an if here by itself. So where does program flow go after this? After line 5 comes line 7. Line 7 isn't any kind of exclusive thing. Line 7 is just coming later. If doesn't necessarily exit. If an if block is executed, then we enter that block, and that's it. So let's say that the test is true. Let's say that the user gives us a number that's less than or equal to 100. We're going to execute lines 1 and then 2. Then we're going to do the test on line 4. And if the test on line 4 is true, we're going to go to line 5. And then where? To line 7. In our earlier example, we had this else statement. Let's ask what happens if the test is true. It's going to be 1 and then 2, then 4. And if it's true, we're going to go to line 5, and then we're going to exit. But again, I think it'd be better if we didn't exit so that we can see what's going to happen next. Let's ask what happens if if the test is true again. We're going to get first line 1, then line 2, then line 4. And if line 4 is true, we're going to go to line 5. The question is, where do we go next? What happens after line 5? We're going to go to line 11. Why from 5 to 11? Because if the test is true and we execute 5, what we see next is an else. And that else is only going to get executed if the test on line 4 was false. So let's run it again in our minds. Let's run it again in our minds, considering that the test is false. What happens if the test is false? We're going to go line 1, then line 2, then line 4. And if 4 is false, where do we go next? Well, if 4 is false, we're going to skip line 5, and we're going to go to line 7. Then we're going to do line 8 and 9, and then onwards to line 11. So you can see that no matter whether the test is true or false, we're going to see 1, 2, and 11. That is, no matter whether the test is true or false, we're going to see line 1, 2, and 11. But if the test is true, it's 1, 2, 4, 5, 11. And if the test is false, it's 1, 2, 4, 7, 8, 9, 11.